Of course, repeatedly there have been intelligence agencies that talk about metadata as opposed to data, and that metadata is not as prying into people's privacy.
Well, I think it's a pretty ridiculous distinction nowadays when perhaps that worked for a letter, where you had to steam open an envelope to read the contents inside. When you're thinking about metadata as the GPS location of your mobile phone, or you're thinking about who you're emailing, or the websites you're browsing, that can reveal a staggering amount of information about what you're doing, to the point where you don't need the content to infer, have you leaked a story to a journalist because you've been emailing each other? Have you gone to a sexual health clinic because your mobile phone data says you have, or have you looked at certain websites for a divorce lawyer? You don't need the content. The metadata is more than revealing enough. And I think what's now becoming apparent is the power of metadata is something that legislators around the world never envisaged, and the law really doesn't recognise just how intrusive metadata can be.
And telecommunication companies in Britain just have to obey what the government says and spy on individuals in this way.
Well, we already have something called the Data Retention Directive, which means countries across Europe pay telecommunications companies to store metadata records for a year, in Britain's case. Now that data is already available to police officers, public authorities and the intelligence agencies. What becomes a problem is Britain's legal system distinguishes between content and metadata in a very serious way. To listen to content, you need a Secretary of State's warrant. To see metadata, an ordinary police officer can get a senior officer to sign a request off. Now, in the modern communications environment, that distinction really doesn't hold water anymore.
And we know a lot about police leaking, don't we, from recent scandals.
Exactly, and so the idea that a police officer can access the websites you visited, or the people you've called, or maybe your GPS location data, without ever having to go before a court, is, in Britain's case, very alarming, because in few countries around the world would that be possible without any kind of independent external check. And that does put us at the risk of the kind of corruption that we have seen in the police, that's whether it's led to the spying on Stephen Lawrence's family or the leaking of information to journalists. If that kind of data is available without proper checks, it will get out there and it will be abused.